Welcome back inside the Verge Studios for another episode of Pardon Our Promotion. How you doing today, Bob?
I'm doing very well. It's the holiday season.
Yeah.
Decorating, cold.
Do you have a good Thanksgiving?
I did. You?
Yeah, very good. Very good. What do you feel like talking about today?
Let's talk about mascots.
Okay, all right.
And mascot sketches. Teams are always challenged with that, how to not only monetize their mascot, but just, how to portray them, throughout the games.
Who's going to help us talk about that?
Old buddy of mine.
Yeah.
Jon Absey. Yeah.
Jon, how are you doing today?
How you guys doing? I'm doing amazing.
Welcome to the Verge Studios. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. What's your background here? Why do you want to come in and why are we having you come on and talk about this?
Because you guys paid me.
Not very much. We'll add that.
Did you get that $5 Starbucks gift card? Thank you so much.
No.
I was I mascotted for 30 years, minor league for a while, and then with the Utah Jazz for 25.
Nice. So you got some experience in the field, in the industry. How did you meet Bob?
Both performing back when he was doing the Blues Brothers act, and it was awesome because when they would come in, I always look forward to those guys coming in because they'd arrive and they'd come into the cage. We'd all sit and talk, and I wouldn't plan anything for the night until they got there. And I kid you not, on the day of, we could create a skit and go out and perform it. I mean, it was awesome. But that takes people with, like those guys that were, one, willing to work with a mascot, two, creative, and three, just, good guys and funny. So
you forgot brilliant.
And good looking guys, yes.
Yeah. So didn't we meet in like South Dakota or North Dakota? I can't remember. We met before you went to the Jazz, right? Where were you before you went to the Jazz in the minors?
I was at the Fargo Fever, the Winnipeg Thunder, and the Sioux Falls Skyforce. And I think it was the Sioux Falls Skyforce.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that's where that.
Informed.
Yeah, and you kind of before you even became a mascot, weren't you in gymnastics or something prior to that, or did you just learn on the fly?
I learned on the fly. I was actually, I got a job at the Fargo Fever, at the American Gold Gymnastics, and they were a show gymnastics team. And I lied on my application because I was a poor college kid and I needed a job. And I said I was a gymnast, and I would go in and I would just sit and watch what everybody else was doing. But I learned. That's how I learned when I got there. I was just teaching myself how to tumble and how to do acrobatics.
Now, when you got to the Jazz, because you got to fill me in because I probably tell the wrong story, but didn't the Jazz hire you to actually create the mascot in the first place?
Yep.
Okay, so you developed the bear.
Yep, we had a bunch of different options. We had like, they called it the Jasmanian Devil instead of, off of Bugs Bunny, the Tasmanian Devil. And then the other option was a black cat, like a Black Panther, because Utah came out of New Orleans, but we stuck with the bear because we wanted to kind of distance ourselves from that whole New Orleans feel. So we went with, an animal that's native to the mountains.
Got it. That makes sense. So on another little bit of trivia, how many bones have you broke being a mascot for the Utah Jazz? Zero. What? Are you kidding me?
No, I swear to you, that's because I was born on a farm and I drank whole milk. I just tear a lot of stuff. Like, I don't know if you can see that. Like, I've...
Show that again. Wait a second. Show that finger. That's a good-looking finger right there.
Yeah.
Holy God.
Oh, my gosh.
Tore my bicep on this one, Duncan, and both hamstrings. I've just injured myself a lot, and a lot of surgeries, shoulder surgeries, back surgeries, hernia, but never broke a bone.
Okay. All right. See, I had the trivia wrong. And any of aspiring mascots out there, just know it isn't that dangerous. It's just Jon's a wild man.
I'm going to say one thing. Just, it's not worth it. Whatever you guys are thinking, because I remember back in the day, it was always like you're in the moment and it was like, God, this is going to be great. And I just felt like, because I was so attached to the job and so committed that I accepted the risks, and I'd always joke about when I get to be 60, my body's gonna suck, and I'd laugh it off. But yeah, man, it sucks. If I had to go back, I don't know if I would do all that stuff again.
Well, you did some pretty crazy things. The toboggan, going down the stairs.
Yeah, like what? Like what kind of crazy stuff?
Yeah,
like,
why don't you fill us in on some of your stunts, if you will?
Give me an injury. Yeah.
An injury? Like I remember, like sledding down the stairs. I remember I was going down and I tried to, I don't know what I was thinking, because I thought of it halfway down the stairs. I thought if I shove off on the sled, I can jump up and I can try and surf it, because I would go down to my belly. And I shoved, and the second I shoved, that sled went like this, and I tumbled head over heels. And on the video, you see my head hit the corner of the stair and my body coming over my head. And I remember seeing a flash of light, and I don't remember waking up until I hit the floor. And on video, you just see me swimming. There were so many times that, like another time I was coming out of the ceiling upside down, and I would come in on a rappel back before they stopped us from doing it. But I always had a static line. And on a static line, the rope doesn't stretch. So I'm coming in upside down, and I would break, and I would stop, this far from the floor. And then one night, my guy that hooks up the rope decided he didn't find his static rope and put in a dynamic rope, and a dynamic rope stretches. So I'm, zipping in, I hit the rope, and I smacked right into the floor head first, just like this. And I remember I woke up, and I looked around, and they were like almost finished with the intros. And in my head, I'm just like, what the heck just happened? And I'm looking around, and dude, I could have probably laid there until tip off. Nobody was going to say it. And then everybody thought it was part of the bit. And I was like, no, I was freaking knocked out. It was crazy.
That, and actually there's our first thing about Mascots, because we can just key off of what you just said. Everybody thought it was part of the bit. The interesting thing about, no matter when you're performing, if you put a great big ta-da at the end, or I meant to do that, the audience is like, oh, yeah, I guess that was part of the skit.
Yeah, no, it always had. Well, the one thing, though, that I liked, you guys remember Andy Kaufman, right? Mm-hmm. The comedian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I loved his type of humor, because you never knew if it was real or if it was fake. And that's what I loved. And that's what I always try to emulate. I mean, there's so many bits out that people would be like, was that real or was that fake? And I loved when they couldn't tell, because I felt like I did it right. I'm trying to think of, there's one a long time ago, one of my first ones. I had a guy in a Mavericks jersey, and it's never been done. I mean, it was I loved it so I had a guy run out on the floor, and he had a sign that said "Jazz suck," and he was running, and I didn't tell anybody about it except for 2 security guards. And I said, listen, he's going to run out on the floor, and I'll pay you $20 each if you catch him. Then I went to my guy, and I'm like, listen, Ryan, you run, do not let them catch you. I'm going to hit you. I go, but I'll pay you $20 if you don't get caught. And all of a sudden he hits the floor running, and what I loved about it is the natural reaction. Because, Bob, when you tell people and there's a lot of people involved, everybody starts to act instead of just doing the natural thing. And it just was so natural. And, when I smashed him at center court and the crowd went crazy, and then, they started hauling him off, and I had to run out and say, no. It was a skit. So I love those moments when everybody thought it was real, but the whole thing was set up.
It's also kind of fun because you're working with the staff, and if you can hold that secret from the staff, they get a great big kick out of it as well, because they didn't know it was coming as well. So those secrets are great.
Except I got a story. So, because I did that so much, I remember I was walking the railing, and I remember seeing this person come by me, and it was really weird because it didn't look like they were just slowly walking down the stairs to get to a seat. They were walking with a purpose. And I remember I kind of looked back, and I was going, and then I jumped off, and I looked again, and sure as hell, this guy goes rolling right onto the floor, across the court, right into the huddle, and Jerry Sloan is standing there, and it was so, and because of everything that I had done and never really telling anybody in my skits, all the security, I looked, and his name is Ron Jensen, and he looked at me like, is this a skit? Like, so nobody jumped him, nobody stopped him because they thought it was just part of my bit. And then Jerry Sloan ended up grabbing him, and it was like chaos. And I remember just standing there going, I'm gonna be in trouble. And even though I didn't do it, it was because I had done that so much that security didn't stop him. So, but I remember that, and I remember Jerry Sloan grabbing him and shoving him out of the huddle, and he's looking around for security, and then all the security come in, and it was kind of a mess.
You know, I'm going to bring up a memory of mine working with you, and earlier on you said how it was creative, and it was always fun for us to come to the Jazz because the same thing. We would always have to spend an extra hour, Scott, because he'd be like, of course, he's been doing a skit a day for years, so he's actually leaning on us. What the hell you want to do today? You know, we got to come up with something. You know, so he'd pretty much just mail it in until we got there, and we'd come up with stuff. You know, but one of my favorite ones was you know how the mascots in the NBA like to jump over celebrities and do a slam dunk, and so we did that, and it's, you know, whoever the celebrity is, he had jumped over him, and, you know, off the tramp, over the top, slam dunk, everyone gets a round of applause. Well, he stood us out there. We had done our halftime show or whatever, in the third quarter or something, we'd come out, and he grabs us, all set up, takes us over, we're standing there. But we had of course practiced earlier, because that's another piece of a mascot skit. So you have to plan it, you have to execute it, and we'll get into the punchlines and all that, but you definitely have to practice it a few times.
Sure.
So he does his usual thing where he's like showing everybody what's going on and getting us lined up to dunk over, and there's a crash mat behind us. So, but when he jumped over the top of us, we grabbed his legs. So we just went sideways, we grabbed his legs, and we yanked him right down out of the sky and just slammed him down onto the mat. And the whole crowd, of course, was like, oh, the whole crowd was that. So then he gets up and he's acting all dizzy. And as he acts up dizzy, I grab the ball. Billy, my Blues Brothers partner, hits him in the stomach. Fake hits him, but he bends over, and as he bends over, I go off his back and I dunk.
Nice.
And the crowd went crazy at that point in time. So that was one of my favorites that we did together. We did a lot of fun ones together, though.
Every time you guys came in, we did something. I mean, and you guys came in every year. I mean, it was fun, and those are the moments that I really cherished and loved when I think back on those, because as a mascot, you end up doing a lot of stuff on your own. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's always kind of fun. You know, I'm more of a team sports guy, but it was always fun when we would do something and it went off really well, and then in the back we could sit and laugh and talk about it. You know.
Right.
The other thing that Bob was saying is something that I learned back then working with them is, you know, we would do the skit, and I know that we'd practice, but we wouldn't over practice. I think something that I learned early on, and I remember I was in Phoenix one year, and they practiced and practiced and practiced, and they practiced so much that I remember going out on the court, and, you know, Bob, you know, Scott, you know, live entertainment, it's live. I mean, you can never guarantee that something isn't going to happen. Well, sure enough, something happened, but we had practiced so much that when something didn't go right, we didn't know what to do. We couldn't ad lib. We were just so stuck on, this is what's supposed to happen. So we ended up, so what I did is I took that away, what I took away from that was I would always, and I had an amazing on-court host. His name was Alan Handy. And I would always say, okay, I'm going to go out. This is what we're going to, you know, start with. This is how it has to end. And we pretty much ad-lib through the middle. I mean, I knew, but I loved the honest reactions. And I know that when Bob and Bill would come in, you know, we would perform, but we wouldn't over, you know, practice, because, I mean, there was a ton of times, Bob, and you know, that it never worked. And all of a sudden we would just impromptu, you know, we would do spontaneous stuff. And I'm telling you, if I ever look back over my years, some of the best stuff was the ad-lib stuff that happened because the skit didn't go right. and it was awesome. I mean, I think those are the best times.
But you do have to hit your marks, you know what I mean? Because I agree with that. That ad-libbing, in fact, it can embellish a skit quite fast. But, you know, where the camera is, where the audience is, you know, where this proper supply is, where the little talent, the little kid is that's joining the skit, where those things have to kind of be in place for all those moving pieces to work. But you're right. After that, you can especially which you can embellish and have fun with the skit. And when you're having fun with that skit, the audience has fun with you.
It's all about the journey, right? It's how we got from point A to point B. We know, but it's how we get there that's the funny part, right?
Right. And we're now speaking of funny parts, you know, that the thing I just said where we pulled them down onto the mat, that was the right turn. I always call it the right turn, where you take an audience down a certain path and then you just a hard left or a hard right, and that's when they either laugh or they cheer or they boo or whatever. And those are the little idiosyncrasies of a great skit. So how did you come up with those, Jon, when you're planning skits where you're like, okay, how am I going to put the pizzazz at the end of this thing?
I wasn't ever a real big fan of a lot of times guys, you know, like they would do something and then somebody get chased off the floor and it was like, there's your ending. Or I always, like a lot of my skits always ended where you were like, was that real or was that not real? You know, I never really had that, you know, ta-da at the end. And I always just kind of let it hang. You know, like the Wes Locker. You remember Wes Locker? He was the old mascot in Miami a long time ago.
Okay.
Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie.
And I remember sitting there, and I copied this skit a number of times, but this is where I got it from. So he was out dunking, and then right at the timeout, a ball boy comes out, and it would never happen, but people don't know that. But he was out there cleaning the floor with a bucket of water. There was a spot or something. You could see him trying to kick it with his foot. Well, then Bernie's trying to get him to move. Well, the kid and him kind of get in a confrontation. Well, Bernie picks up the water, and they start kind of circling a little bit. And as the kid's running off the floor, Bernie chucks the water, and there's an officer standing there. And this cop just gets hit with this water. And I remember, I mean, you know, I'm a mascot, and I'm sitting in the crowd going, oh my hell. I mean, I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and it was great. And I love that type of humor where, you know, it's not comical, you know, like that whole, you know, da 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 da, you know, and you run off the floor. I loved how it just kind of ended, and everybody had that moment of like, holy hell, you know, what's gonna happen? But you never find out. But I love those type of things. So I never really, you know, had an ending in mind that it was always an extreme thing, and I had to think, you know, outside the box a lot, because back in the day, you know, I had a skit every game, and a lot of mascots did. So it was kind of hard. I remember when I first started, I even had 2 skits. So you start to run out of ideas. But in today's world, and Bob, you might have seen this now, is there, you know, it was all about entertainment and family and all this other stuff. And I'm just saying, on my part, is from what I see and from what I'm hearing, there's not many mascots out on the court doing skits anymore. It's all about social media and TikTok and stuff. So that it's kind of changed a little bit in the whole approach to, you know, a mascot, you know, where our time was on the court and our time was in the crowd. Now it's all about social media. You see that, Bob?
I think, and before you answer, sorry, I just think it's people don't know how to utilize their mascots properly anymore. It's too easy to just give them an appearance or put them on social media and check the box. Like, you know, we need to promotion staff, entertainment staff need to do a better job of utilizing them in game, because there's no reason that the skits or any of that should go away.
Yes,
you know,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, and there has been a trend. There's been a trend to social media in a lot of areas in sports promotions. But the interesting thing that a buddy of mine says, it really doesn't move the needle. It used to move the needle. Social media used to move the needle. But now I just I think that we have to go old school, and we have to go back to actually entertaining those fans while they're there. Because, yeah, they can get on TikTok and see all kinds of funny things, but then they'll go to a sporting event and be bored out of their mind.
Right.
But sporting events are still great places to go. And I think it was Mark Cuban that said, I want to get the people to look up from their phones. So he tries with the Mavericks. Now I haven't seen that, but that's one of his little. He wrote a little blog on it. That he said, I want them looking at the court. I want them looking at the video board. I don't want them looking at their phones and stuff. So it's. I don't know if it's back to where it should be, but that's why we put you on the show because of your history, your 30-year history. So.
Well, and something else is. I remember a change happened as well back when Jumbotron started to get big. Do you remember so back in the day, I remember at the Jazz, we had just those tiny little Jumbotrons and you could barely see. So nobody ever really looked up at the Jumbotron except to see the score. And then they'd watch the floor the whole time. And I remember I could run out on the court and I could hold up a sign, I could do whatever, but everybody was tuned into the floor. And once we got the big Jumbotron, I remember running out and holding up sign and nobody would be saying or cheering or anything. And I realized if I'm not on the Jumbotron, nobody's seeing me. Yep. So we had to make a whole rule that, if I hit the floor, the Jumbotron has to hit me. You know what I mean? That's why they'd always be like, okay, go out. And I'd be looking at the Jumbotron. I said, no, because you guys are still running either a commercial, a video or whatever. I said, when that's over and that camera can hit me, I'll run out. But I never ran out if there was something on the board.
And that's a really good rule of thumb because there's a lot of mascots, and the minors especially, that overexpose themselves. And that's not a politically incorrect thing to say. Yeah. Okay? They're not exposing themselves. They're overexposing themselves. Even better. And so there was one mascot that ended up on TMZ a few years ago. But we'll set that aside, okay? But the point is they're out too often, and when they're out too often, their effect is lessened exponentially. So they have to go out. They have to make the big. That's what the Blues Brothers, when we used to perform, we would make the big entrance, we'd make the big exits, and you have a big impact when you're out there. Otherwise, you get old and people get tired of you. Sure. Apathy sets in quick.
Yeah, no, and you nailed it. That's just like at any event that you do outside the arena even, is a lot of mascots, they go out there and I'm just basically concurring with you here, but you always want to leave them wanting more. A lot of times, and I see that happen a lot, is mascots just go out there with nothing to do and they're just out there. And it's like in my world back then is if I didn't have something to do, I wasn't on the court. Otherwise I'm just a guy in a suit standing there. Mm-hmm. And I hated that, because I remember I'd go do college shows and around the country, and the mascots would always come in and, hey, can you watch me? And I'd watch them. And that was always what I said, I go, when I was watching you, all you did was stand by the basket. I go, if you're not going to do something, just don't be standing. I go, either leave the floor or come up with something to do. I go, otherwise you're just a guy in a suit standing there, and anybody could do that,
That's right.
So,
and that even goes. We talked about it, I think, on an earlier podcast about the fact that even the people that work for the teams, they're not in the costumes, but they have the logo on their shirt. They're always on as well, and so if they're standing there looking at their phone, it shows that they're not interested in their game or the fans or whatever they're around. Everybody is part of that show. Everyone's part of the whole event. And so if you're, even as a front office person, if you're out there, you have to be shaking hands or talking to somebody or be on, and have a smile on your face or whatever. But yeah, because people are watching no matter what. So what happens with mascots has to happen kind of system-wide in front offices.
Yeah.
And something else with that, Bob, is exactly what you said. And I've seen it happen where those game op directors or game operations staff. I think I just said that, but what would happen is something would happen that wasn't supposed to, and instead of going in the back out of the way of people, they would show their frustration in the corner, and it was like you just opened up, because seriously, 80-90% of the time, even though something didn't go right on the court, the fans don't know. Only the people that were putting it on.
Correct.
But they'll know the second you're upset yelling at a dancer, a mascot, or whoever, they know something wrong happened, But that's why, that's another thing is I've always seen is, if I did something wrong, somebody would start saying something and I would just go, and I'd be like, in the back, because I don't want anybody to see that, yeah, we screwed up. We can talk about it in the back out of the way, but there's a lot of times I've seen that, and they need to know that it needs to happen in the back.
Like land on your head in the middle of the floor.
Nobody, what's funny? Nobody even said anything. Like, seriously, I was like, I actually talked to Luke, my old assistant, and I was like, hey, man, if that ever happens again, I'm not joking. that really, I'm out.
So this has been fun, and I think we could even have a part 2 because it's been so fun talking with you about it. But I do want to, Scott might have a question, but I have one for you. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Do you have any favorites? People always ask me, oh, where's your favorite city that you ever went to? But do you have a favorite skit or favorite sketch or even one that went totally sideways other than the ones you just told me that you kind of remember from your 3 decades?
Wow. And Bob, you got to know this. When it comes to that many years, performing, there's so many. And to just pick one, I might as well just throw a dart. I mean,
just come up with one.
Kind of say, yeah, I mean,
or is it that landing on your head, you've just forgotten everything?
No, I mean, and I'm dead serious. I would say, Bob, a lot of my skits that I enjoyed the most were working with you guys or working with other halftime teams that came in, but you guys were actually more interactive, and did stuff, but it was great doing that. And one skit that I love, and I'm going to let it out of the bag here, and it's been seen millions and millions of times. The one where the guy dumps a beer over my head? It's kind of gone viral.
Yeah, go ahead.
I bet you it's been 15 years since I've done it. That was a bit, and I tell everybody it wasn't, But that was another one where the cops went, ushered the guy out, and, we had to hurry up, run up and tell him it was a skit. That was a great one. When it comes to stunts, riding a professional bull and probably doing a one-armed handstand on top of a 25-foot ladder. Those are what stand out. Other than that, mascotting in general, I just love being in the crowd, and I love doing charity work in the community.
Yeah.
What would you say, as we start talking to our future generation of mascots and entertainers, one of the biggest struggles I've had was hiring a mascot actor and giving them proper instruction, and it's just such a hard thing to execute in a meaningful way. So I don't know if there's one piece of advice or just something that over your 30 years that you found to be more prevalent, something top of mind when you're mascotting, a rule of thumb, a best practice, if you will. If you got one thing to say to the future mascotters out there, what would it be?
I know that's enough. Too. No. Okay. So I guess how I look at it is I look back in the day in the 90s, late 90s and stuff, and was the pinnacle of mascotting. I felt like, a lot of guys in the leagues were just performing well. And there were some things to pick out. One is the teams or the mascots that did really well, the teams never tried to manage it. They put input and stuff, but they didn't try to drive it. You hired that guy for a reason. Let him do it. The other one is, let him go out and, prove he can do what you guys want him to do. Third is the other thing that you saw with the mascots that were very popular is they were like their own show. Like the Jazz, like when I would go out, I would tell them, I want dancers or I don't want dancers. Or if they said, hot time out, everybody out. I never went out. I let everybody go out. And at the last 20 seconds or so, I would run out to get the crowd to cheer. I never wanted to be just part of the entertainment. I was, I always looked at it as I was my own entity, and for the crowd to, like, I was the conductor, and for them to have respect in you. The other thing is, as a game ops guy or woman, director, just don't send out your mascot because you don't have anything to do. Because you think, oh, look, I'm doing something, but what you're really doing is you're wrecking his credibility if it's not a good time to go, because there was a number of times where they would be like, hey, go out on the court. And I'm like, we're down 15. Nobody's going to cheer because there's 2 minutes left. We all know we're going to lose. Yeah. So I always came up with, I had cold timeouts, medium timeouts, and hot timeouts. And everybody had the list, and we'd all go through it. But they all, after a while, understood that, listen, for as long as I've been in the league, they trusted me. They knew that I wasn't just going to go out there and make a fool of myself. If I was going out there, there was a purpose. How was that?
That's beautiful. And I'm going to add to that, because you said you're your own entity. And, especially in minor league sports, the players move fast through there's player changes all the time. They have a brand and they have a mascot. And those are the two big things. And so the mascot, when that mascot is his own entity, he can be such a force for public opinion and reaction and all that, if it's done right and it's not overused and everything that we just talked about over the last 25 minutes or so. So yeah, to focus on that and say, this is a powerful part of our brand and it has to be treated that way. Yeah, and you did a great job when you were at the Jazz. Go ahead.
Can I say one more thing? And
sure.
Just to jump on your back on that is back in the day, I think that they looked for the right person to be a mascot. And I feel like in today's market, they're just like, yeah, but he'll do it for 25 grand. You know what I mean? There's more qualified mascots or people to do it, but this guy's cheaper. And it's like you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I can say.
Yeah, that's I do see that more often than not. And that's very insightful. That this is, the mascot is a huge part of your show if you treat it that way. If you don't treat it that way, then it won't be. So, and they have the power to really do a lot of good things for the entertainment. Jon, it was awesome having you on. I mean, I think, like Bob said, we could probably talk for another at least 2 shows worth of stuff here.
I'm in.
And it might be. Before you go, I think I want to see your finger again. I just want to see that pinky one more time. Oh,
that is nuts.
There you go.
Dude.
Leave that with you.
I want to show you.
Well, we appreciate it, Jon. Thanks so much. We'll get you on the show again. Bob, anything else for Jon?
No, it's great having you, Jon. Great seeing you, too.
Oh, it's good to see you. Give the family a hug, Bob. Scott, you too. I don't know if you have family. I don't really know you, but
I'll give my family a hug for you, definitely. All right, Jon, we'll see you later. Thanks, guys, for joining us today. We got more to come on the next episode. If you have any questions, post them, comment on them, send them to us. Anything you'd like us to discuss, send that to us as well. Until next time, though, guys, it's all about your fans. We'll see you later.